I'm Aaron. I'm 32 years old, and my own brother destroyed my son's most precious birthday gift right in front of him, laughing as my boy's heart broke. But what my father did moments later was somehow even worse. Before I tell you how a simple piece of wood led to the complete collapse of my family, and a promotion I never saw coming, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Alright, let's get into it. The scent that brings it all back is pine. Sharp, clean, and full of promises. Even now, 3 years later, when I'm in my workshop and the saw bites into a fresh plank, the dust kicks up and for a split second, I'm not here. I'm back in my father's oversized, sterile living room. I'm watching my son's face, lit up by 7 birthday candles, just moments before it all went wrong. Today, my son Leo is turning 10. In my hands, I'm holding his new gift. It's a detailed, hand-carved model of a spaceship, the Stardrifter 5, from his favorite comic book. Every panel, every tiny thruster, has been sanded smooth by my own fingers. I've spent the last 2 months on it, working late into the night after Leo's asleep, fueled by coffee and the thought of the look on his face when he sees it. This year, it will be different. This year, no one will ruin it. But my brain has other plans. The high-pitched whine of the rotary tool fades, and I hear a different sound. The sound of laughter. Cruel, dismissive laughter. My brother's laughter. Plays in my head like a movie I can't turn off. My brother, Evan, throws my son's birthday present against the wall, laughing while Leo cried in front of everyone. Our whole family was there, aunts, uncles, cousins. And my family just said, "Oh, come on. It's just a joke." But it wasn't. It was a message. A clear, brutal message to both me and my 7-year-old son. Then my father, Richard, stood up. He was a man who commanded silence without ever raising his voice. He slowly, deliberately, took off the heavy gold signet ring he never removed and slammed it down on the glass coffee table. The crack of metal on glass made everyone flinch. The room, which had been buzzing with awkward murmurs, went dead silent. Leo's sobs were the only sound left. And what my father said next, it didn't just shatter the moment. It shattered our entire family. He looked right at me, right past his crying grandson, and with ice in his voice, he delivered the final blow. I can still feel the weight of his words, and they had nothing to do with defending his grandson. He was defending the monster. As I stand here now, holding the Stardrifter 5, I run my thumb over the smooth canopy. I promised myself after that day that I would build a new life for Leo, a fortress where no one could hurt him like that again. And I did. I built it piece by piece, just like this ship. But what I didn't know was that the past wasn't done with me. An email arrived last week. A call to reconcile. They want back in. And I have a feeling they're not coming for forgiveness. They're coming because they found out I'm finally worth something. Let me take you back to that day. Leo's 7th birthday. It was supposed to be perfect. We were at my parents' house, which was always my mother Eleanor's preference. She liked to host. It gave her a sense of control, a way to stage manage the family so we all looked perfect from the outside. Their house was one of those modern marvels of glass and white marble that looked more like a corporate headquarters than a home. It was cold, impersonal, and the absolute worst place for a kid's birthday party. But Leo didn't care. He was 7. All he saw was a big space to run around in with his friends from school, and a mountain of presents in the corner. His excitement was a tangible thing, a bright light in that sterile house. My ex-wife and I had an amicable divorce a few years prior, and our custody agreement was simple. We always put Leo first. She was out of state visiting her own sick mother, so I was on my own for this one, determined to make it special. The centerpiece of it all was my gift. For 3 months, I had spent every spare hour in my cramped garage, which I'd converted into a makeshift woodshop. I was working a dead-end office job back then, a job my father had gotten me, and woodworking was my only escape, my only passion, and I had poured all of it into Leo's gift. It was a medieval castle, made entirely of hand-carved oak and birch. It had turrets, a working drawbridge, tiny handcrafted knights, and a dragon with scales made from inlaid walnut. It was the most ambitious thing I'd ever made. It was a piece of my soul. When the moment came, I brought it out. The kids gasped. Leo's eyes were as wide as dinner plates. He reached out a trembling finger and touched the drawbridge chain. "You made this, Daddy?" he whispered, his voice full of awe. "I did, buddy," I said, my heart swelling. Every piece. That was the moment they chose to arrive. My brother Evan, and my parents Richard and Eleanor. Always late. Always making an entrance. Evan, 5 years my senior, was the golden child. He worked with my father at his successful marketing firm, had the perfect wife, the perfect house, and a condescending smirk that he wore like a badge of honor. He was everything my father valued. Pragmatic, ruthless, and wealthy. I was the artistic one, the disappointment. Evan sauntered in, a drink already in his hand. He glanced at the castle, his eyes scanning it with bored disdain. "Still playing with blocks, Aaron?" he said, just loud enough for me to hear. My father clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to look supportive, but felt more like a correction. "It's a nice hobby, son," he said, his voice laced with that familiar tone of faint amusement. "Keeps you busy." My mother, Eleanor, just smiled her placid, everything is fine smile. "It's quaint, dear," she said, before immediately changing the subject to a recent promotion Evan had received. She was the family peacekeeper, which really meant she was an expert at ignoring anything unpleasant and sweeping dysfunction under the rug. Her primary goal was maintaining the illusion of a perfect family, no matter the cost to those within it. Leo, oblivious, was already lost in his new world. He was setting up the knights on the battlements, making quiet roaring sounds for the dragon. His joy was so pure, so complete. For a few minutes, I let myself believe that maybe, just this once, things would be okay. I should have known better. With my family, the storm was always just over the horizon, and it was about to make landfall right in the middle of my son's birthday party. The breaking point came, as it always did, disguised as a joke. After the cake and the singing, Leo had carefully placed his wooden castle on the low marble coffee table. He wanted everyone to see it. He was so proud. His friends were gathered around, pointing at the little details, their faces full of wonder. Evan had been circling the room, making slick comments, charming the other parents. He refilled his drink and then made his way over to the group of kids. "What's this, then?" he said, feigning interest. He leaned over the table, his shadow falling over the castle. "Pretty flimsy-looking thing. You sure it's safe for the king?" I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Evan, don't," I said, my voice low. He shot me a look, a flash of pure malice in his eyes before it was replaced by his usual smirk. "Relax, little brother. I'm just looking." He reached out, his hand hovering over the main tower. And then it happened. He stumbled, a clumsy, exaggerated motion that fooled no one. His hand shot out to catch his balance, and he slammed it down directly on top of the castle. The sound was sickening, a crackle and splinter of dry wood, a noise that felt like a bone breaking. The main tower collapsed. The drawbridge snapped. The tiny knights scattered across the marble floor. The dragon's head broke clean off. 3 months of my life, my heart, my love for my son, all of it destroyed in a single deliberate second. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Every eye in the room was on the wreckage. Leo just stared, his mouth a perfect O of disbelief. Then, his lower lip began to tremble, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. A deep, heart-wrenching sob escaped his small chest. And Evan laughed. It wasn't a nervous chuckle. It was a full-throated, genuine laugh of amusement. He stood up straight, a triumphant look on his face. "Whoops," he said, not a trace of remorse in his voice. "Clumsy me." Something inside me snapped. I moved toward him, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "What is wrong with you?" I seethed. Before I could take another step, my father's hand was on my chest, holding me back. "Aaron, stop it," he said, his voice firm. "It was an accident." "An accident?" I stared at him, incredulous. "You saw what he did." "Oh," Come on, Ratch, Evan said, using the childhood nickname I hated. Don't still be mad about that cake thing. We were kids. He was confusing two different events, two different cruelties, but it didn't matter. To him, they were all the same. All just jokes. It's just a joke. Lighten up. He was just playing Aaron. Don't make a scene. My mother chimed in, already trying to smooth things over, her smile strained. She started trying to distract the other kids, her voice artificially bright. A scene? My son was crying, his dream gift shattered, and they were worried about a scene. I looked around the room. The other parents were looking away, suddenly fascinated by their shoes. My own family, my aunts and uncles, were just standing there, silent, complicit. Then Leo's tiny voice cut through the tension. He tugged on my shirt, his face blotchy and wet with tears. "Daddy," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why did Uncle Evan do that? Did I do something bad?" That was it. That was the moment the world shifted. It wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about my rivalry with my brother or my desperate need for my father's approval. It was about this little boy who was being taught that his feelings didn't matter, that his uncle's cruelty was a joke and his pain was an inconvenience. I looked from Leo's innocent, confused face to my family's cold, dismissive one, and I knew this place was not safe for my son. We were done. I didn't say another word. I knelt down, gathered my sobbing son into my arms, and held him tight. "No, buddy," I whispered into his hair, my voice thick with emotion. "You did nothing bad. Nothing at all. We're going home." I picked him up and walked out. I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on me, a mixture of annoyance and disbelief. I didn't care. As I buckled Leo into his car seat, he was still crying softly. I handed him the dragon's broken body, the one piece I had instinctively scooped up from the floor. He clutched it like a lifeline. The drive back to my small, rented house was silent. The silence of a decision being made. A decision hardening from a desperate impulse into an unshakable resolve. When we got home, I put Leo to bed. He fell asleep exhausted, still holding the broken dragon. I waited until midnight, then I drove back to my parents' house. The party guests were long gone. The lights were still on. I let myself in with my old key. They were in the living room, Richard, Eleanor, and Evan having a nightcap. The wreckage of the castle was gone, swept away, as if it never existed. "There you are," my mother said, a tone of relief in her voice. "We were worried. You just stormed out." "He overreacted," Evan said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "He's always been too sensitive." My father was silent, watching me. He was the judge, the jury, and I always felt like the one on trial. "I came to say goodbye," I said, my voice flat and empty of the rage I felt earlier. It was something colder now. Eleanor scoffed lightly. "Aaron, don't be so dramatic. You'll feel better in the morning." "No," I said, looking directly at my father. "I'm done. We're done. I will not raise my son in a family where his feelings are a joke and cruelty is entertainment. I will not have him look up to a man like Evan, or be taught that your approval is the only thing that matters." I glanced at my mother. "And I won't have him learn that keeping the peace means letting the bullies win." Richard's jaw tightened. This was not how things were supposed to go. I was supposed to come back, apologize for making a scene, and things would go back to normal. That was the family script. I had just thrown the script into the fire. "You're making a huge mistake," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You have a job at my company, a life we provided for you." It was a threat, a reminder that my salary, my very stability, was tied to him. "You can keep the job," I said. The words felt liberating, terrifying. "I'll be out of my office by the end of the day tomorrow." For the first time, Evan looked genuinely shocked. I had just voluntarily given up the one thing he thought I was clinging to. "Don't come crawling back when you can't pay your rent," Richard warned. I just nodded. "Goodbye." I turned and walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. The next morning I packed. 2 suitcases for me, 2 for Leo. I took my tools from the garage, the only things that felt truly mine. I found a small, dingy apartment above a laundromat on the other side of town. It was a shoebox compared to the house I was leaving, but it felt like a palace. Felt safe. As Leo and I stood in the empty living room, the smell of bleach and damp clothes drifting up from downstairs, he looked up at me. "Is this our new home, Daddy?" I knelt down and looked him in the eye. "Yes, it is. It's our new castle." He held up the broken dragon. "Can you fix him?" I took the small wooden figure from his hand and nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "Yes, buddy," I said. "I can fix him. We're going to fix everything." It was a promise to him and to myself. And as I stood there, with nothing but a few bags and a broken wooden dragon, I had never felt more terrified or more free in my entire life. The first 6 months were brutal. The freedom I felt on that first day was quickly replaced by the crushing weight of reality. My savings dwindled with alarming speed. The apartment was small, the walls were thin, and the constant hum of the dryers below became the soundtrack to our new life. I took on any work I could find. Stocking shelves at a grocery store overnight, delivering pizzas, assembling flat-pack furniture for people who had homes that felt a million miles away from my own. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally. More than once, I'd sit in my car after a 14-hour day, look at my calloused hands, and hear my father's voice in my head. "Don't come crawling back when you can't pay your rent." The temptation was there, a dark whisper in the back of my mind. It would be so easy to just give up, to go back, to accept the comfortable cage I had left. But then I would go inside and I'd see Leo. He never complained. He adapted with the kind of resilience that only children possess. He thought living above a laundromat was an adventure. He did his homework at our small kitchen table, and in the evenings we would work on fixing the wooden dragon together. That little broken toy became our project, our symbol. My passion for woodworking was the one thing that kept me sane. I didn't have a garage anymore, so I worked on my tiny, rickety balcony, carving small animal figures out of scrap wood I'd find. It wasn't much, but it was mine. One afternoon, while walking home, I took a different route and stumbled upon a place I'd never seen before. It was an old brick building with a faded sign that read, "Samuel's Fine Woodcraft." The windows were dusty, but through them, I could see the hulking shapes of lathes and planers. A scent of sawdust and varnish hung in the air, a smell that felt like coming home. On an impulse, I pushed the door open. A bell jingled. The inside of the shop was a chaotic wonderland of wood. Planks of cherry, oak, and maple were stacked to the ceiling. Half-finished chairs and cabinets stood like silent sentinels. And in the middle of it all was a man who looked as old and sturdy as the oak trees he worked with. He had a shock of white hair, a face mapped with wrinkles, and hands that were thick and gnarled but moved with a surprising grace as he guided a piece of wood over a sander. He shut off the machine and looked at me over the top of his glasses. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. I was just looking," I stammered, feeling like an intruder. "You have a beautiful shop," he grunted, wiping his hands on a rag. "It's a messy shop. What do you do?" "I'm a woodworker," I said, then immediately felt foolish. "I mean, as a hobby." He eyed me up and down. "Let me see your hands." I held them out. They were a mess, pizza grease under the nails, a fresh splinter from a packing crate, but also the telltale calluses of someone who handled tools. He took my hand, his grip surprisingly strong, and turned it over. He ran his thumb over the hardened skin on my palm. He looked from my hands to my eyes, and I felt like he could see right through the exhausted pizza guy and into the desperate artist underneath. "These aren't the hands of a hobbyist," he said, his expression unreadable. "And they're not the hands for packing boxes. This hand isn't for closing up other people's dreams. It's for building them." He pointed with his chin to a broom in the corner. "The floor needs sweeping. You can start tomorrow. 7 a.m. We'll see if you're any good." I was so stunned, I could barely speak. I can't pay you for lessons." He waved a dismissive hand. "You'll work for it. You sweep, you stack, you learn. Now get out of here, you're letting the cold in." That man was Samuel. And he didn't just give me a job. He gave me a lifeline, He became the mentor I never had, the father figure I always craved. He was tough, demanding, and brutally honest. He broke down everything I thought I knew and built it back up, stronger and better. He taught me about the grain of the wood, how to listen to it, how to respect it. He taught me that woodworking wasn't just about making things. It was about giving a piece of a living thing a second life. Under his gruff exterior was a deep well of kindness and wisdom. Samuel didn't just save my craft. In many ways, he saved me. Working with Samuel was like learning a new language I already instinctively understood. The hours were long, the work was hard, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I would sweep the floors, haul lumber, and watch him work, absorbing everything like a sponge. In the evenings, he would let me use the shop for my own projects. With access to proper tools and good materials, my work flourished. I started making more intricate toys for Leo, articulated animals, puzzle boxes, a fleet of little wooden cars. He loved them. One evening, as he was lining up the cars, he said, "You should sell these, Daddy. Other kids would like them." The idea was terrifying. Selling my work meant putting it out there to be judged. It meant risking failure. But looking at Leo's hopeful face, I knew I had to try. Samuel helped me. He was surprisingly savvy about the modern world for a man who seemed to belong to a different century. "The world's marketplace is in that little phone of yours," he grumbled. But he helped me take professional-looking photos of my work and set up an online store. We needed a name. I was stumped. Leo, who was helping by organizing with scraps, looked up and said, "What about Leo's Landing? Like a safe place for toys to land." It was perfect. It was more than perfect. It was exactly what this new life was supposed to be. A safe landing for us. And so, Leo's Landing was born. I started small, listing just a few items. To my shock, the first sale came within a week. Then another, and another. They were small orders, but they felt like monumental victories. Each sale was a validation, a tiny rebellion against my father's belief that my passion was worthless. The money I made went straight into a savings account I opened, a humble start to a new college fund for Leo. Word started to spread locally. A mom blogger bought one of my puzzle boxes and wrote a glowing review. My orders doubled overnight. I was working every spare minute I had, a blur of sawdust and shipping labels. It was exhausting, but it was a good kind of tired. The kind that comes from building something of your own. And that's when she appeared. Her name was Chloe. She ran another online toy store, one that specialized in cheap, brightly colored plastic toys imported from overseas. At first, I noticed her name popping up as a visitor to my site. Then the copying started. It began subtly. I released a line of jointed woodland creatures. 2 weeks later, she had a line of plastic, mass-produced animals in eerily similar poses. I designed a unique rocking horse with a curved, minimalist design. A month later, a plastic version appeared on her site, the curves just slightly different. It was infuriating. It felt like she was stealing not just my designs, but the very heart of what I was doing. My work was about quality, craftsmanship, natural materials. Hers was about cutting corners and making a quick buck. That's when my old friend, Mark, re-entered my life. We had been best friends since kindergarten, but we drifted apart after I left my old life behind. He called me out of the blue, saying he'd heard about Leo's Landing and was blown away. He sounded so genuinely happy for me. "Man, this is incredible," he said over the phone. "You finally did it. You turned your hobby into a real business. How's it going? What are you working on next?" His support felt like a balm on my stressed-out soul. I was so isolated, and having my old friend back felt good. I told him everything. I told him about my frustrations with Chloe. I told him about my plans for a new, big project I was designing for the big annual artisan craft fair. It was my chance to make a real name for myself. I was so naive. I was so desperate for an ally that I didn't see the flashing red warning signs. I invited the viper right into my home, and I was about to find out just how venomous his bite was. The Artisan Craft Fair was the biggest event of its kind in the state. Getting a booth there was a huge deal. It was a juried event, and being accepted was a mark of quality. For weeks, I poured every ounce of my energy and creativity into my showpiece. It was a multi-level dollhouse, designed to look like a cross-section of a giant, hollowed-out tree. It had winding staircases, little wooden balconies, and furniture made from twigs and moss. It was unique, magical. It was my ticket to the next level. Mark was my biggest cheerleader throughout the process. He'd call me almost every day. "How's the treehouse coming along, man? You should add a little rope ladder. Oh, and what about a skylight?" His suggestions were good, and his enthusiasm felt infectious. He'd ask for pictures of my progress, and I'd send them to him, proud of how it was taking shape. He was the only person besides Leo and Samuel who had seen the finished design. "This is gonna blow them away," he said, the night before the fair. "Chloe and her plastic junk won't stand a chance." The day of the fair arrived, buzzing with energy. I set up my booth, placing the treehouse dollhouse in the center. It looked even better than I had imagined. People started to flock to my table, their reactions a mix of awe and delight. This was it. This was the moment everything was going to change. Around noon, I heard a commotion a few aisles over. A crowd was gathering around a large, flashy booth. Chloe's booth. My stomach twisted. I asked a neighboring vendor to watch my table for a minute and went to see what was going on. And then I saw it. In the center of her booth, under a spotlight, was a plastic, mass-produced dollhouse, designed to look like a tree, with winding staircases, little plastic balconies, and a rope ladder. It was a cheap, soulless caricature of my work, but it was undeniably based on my design. She had even incorporated the last-minute suggestions Mark had made. She had launched it online that morning, undercutting my price by a huge margin. The blood drained from my face. My breath caught in my throat. Felt like the air had been punched out of me. How could she have possibly known? I stumbled back to my booth, my mind racing. Coincidence? Impossible. The details were too specific. My heart was pounding. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. "Check your email." An invoice was sent to the wrong address. Confused, I opened my laptop. The email was there, a forwarded message chain. My eyes scanned the contents, and the world tilted on its axis. It was a chain between Chloe and Mark, my best friend. There were pictures, my pictures, the ones I had sent him. There were notes, detailed descriptions of my process. And at the bottom, an invoice from Chloe's company to a consulting firm I'd never heard of. A payment for design consultation. Payment made out to Mark. He had sold me out. Every encouraging word, every suggestion, every "I'm so proud of you, man" had been a lie. He had been feeding my dreams to my biggest competitor for cash. I felt a cold, white-hot rage build inside me, so intense it made me dizzy. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash something. I wanted to find Mark but then I looked at my hands. I looked at the beautiful, handcrafted treehouse sitting on my table, and I looked at the line of people still waiting to see it. Rage wouldn't fix this. Despair wouldn't fix this. Only work would. I took a deep breath. I walked back to the front of my booth, a new, hard-edged calm settling over me. Someone asked me a question about the type of wood I used. I answered it. Then another. Then another. I would not let them break me. Not my family. Not my competitors. And certainly not the man who I used to call my best friend. The fair wasn't over yet. And neither was I. For the rest of the afternoon, I operated on pure adrenaline and defiance. I talked to every single person who came to my booth. I showed them the tiny, hand-sanded details on the furniture. I explained how the grain of the birch wood made the floors look like they were shimmering. I let them feel the weight and warmth of real wood, contrasting it with the cheap, hollow feel of the plastic imitation a few aisles away. I didn't mention Chloe. I didn't mention the betrayal. I just focused on my work, letting its quality speak for itself. Slowly, the tide began to turn. People who had been at Chloe's booth started drifting over to mine, drawn by the buzz. I could hear them whispering. "The plastic one is a copy. This one has a soul." Late in the afternoon, a woman approached my booth. She was older, impeccably dressed in a sharp business suit that seemed out of place among the casual craft fair crowd. She didn't look at me. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, were fixed on the treehouse. She walked around it slowly, examining it from every angle. She ran a finger lightly over the edge of a miniature table, then peered inside at the tiny, carved fireplace. She spent nearly 10 minutes in silence, just looking. The crowd around my booth seemed to hold its breath. Finally, she looked up and met my eyes. "You're Aaron, the creator of Leo's Landing," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am," I managed to say, my throat suddenly dry. She handed me a business card. "My name is Margaret Albright. I'm the head of acquisitions for the Oakhaven Toy Collective." Oakhaven. I knew the name. Everyone did. They were one of the biggest, most respected toy companies in the world. They had a reputation for quality and classic design. "I've been following your online store for a few months," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "Your work is exceptional. This piece," she gestured to the treehouse, "is a work of art. I saw the imitation over there." She said the word imitation with a subtle curl of her lip. "It's what made me seek you out. A copy is just noise. This is a signal." My heart was hammering against my ribs. "Oakhaven is launching a new prestige line of artisanal toys," she continued. "We're looking for a North American partner, a craftsman with vision and integrity. We've been quietly searching for months, considering many established firms." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "I believe our search may be over. I'm buying this showpiece for our corporate collection, and I want to schedule a meeting with you next week to discuss a potential exclusive partnership." The world went quiet. All the noise of the fair, all the anger and betrayal I felt, it all just faded away. This was it. This was the validation I had been working for, fighting for. It wasn't just a sale. It was a life-changing opportunity, handed to me by someone who saw the true value in what I did. I shook her hand, my own hand trembling slightly. I would be honored, Mrs. Albright. "Please, call me Margaret," she said with a small smile. As she completed the purchase, a thought struck me. "You said you were considering other firms?" "Yes," she said, signing the credit card slip, "including a very persistent marketing firm that wanted to license some designs. They had a lot of confidence, but no soul in their products. Your father's firm, I believe." My blood ran cold. My father's company had been competing for the same prize, and they had lost. To me. Little did I know, this incredible victory was about to set me on a direct collision course with the past I had tried so desperately to escape. The week after the craft fair was a whirlwind. News of Mrs. Albright's purchase and Oakhaven's interest spread like wildfire through the small community of artisans. My online sales exploded. I had to temporarily stop taking new orders just to keep up. I hired my first part-time employee, a retired carpenter from the neighborhood, to help me with the sanding and finishing. For the first time, Leo's Landing felt less like a desperate gamble and more like a real, sustainable business. The meeting with Oakhaven was even better than I could have hoped. They weren't just offering me a contract. They were offering me a partnership. They wanted to fund a massive expansion of my workshop, provide me with distribution, and handle all the marketing, leaving me free to do what I did best: design and create. The salary they proposed was more money than I had ever dreamed of, enough to secure Leo's college fund 10 times over. It was the ultimate promotion, from a struggling craftsman to a recognized brand. But more importantly, they respected my vision. They wanted to protect it. Amidst this chaos of success, the email arrived. The sender was my mother, Eleanor. The subject line simply read, "Family." My finger hovered over the delete button. I hadn't spoken to any of them in nearly 3 years, aside from a few stilted holiday texts for Leo's sake. I had no desire to reopen that wound, but curiosity, that old treacherous feeling, got the better of me. I clicked it open. "Dearest Aaron, I know it has been a long time, too long. Your father and I have been hearing the most wonderful things about your business. A little bird told us about your success at the craft fair. We are so incredibly proud of everything you've accomplished. It's clear you've found your footing. We were wrong to let so much time pass. Family is too important. Your brother Evan misses you and his nephew. We all do. We would love to see what you've built. Perhaps we could visit your new workshop this Saturday? Let's put the past behind us. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. The words were so smooth, so reasonable. Proud of you. Family is important. Put the past behind us. It sounded like everything I had once longed to hear, but it felt hollow, calculated. The timing was too perfect. They had ignored me for 3 years while I was struggling, delivering pizzas and barely making rent. Now that Oakhaven was knocking on my door, now that my name was in a press release, suddenly they were proud. A part of me, the little boy who still craved his parents' approval, wanted to believe it. But the man who had fought his way here knew better. Before I could reply, my phone rang. It was my Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother. He was a quiet man, a decent man who had always been caught in my father's shadow. "Aaron? It's Rob," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I heard your mother was reaching out. I need to tell you something. I was at their house for dinner last night. Your name came up. Eleanor was on the phone with your Aunt Carol. I heard her. She said, yes, it's a lovely little hobby for him, but it's mostly just luck. He's still just playing with toys. Then she said that now you were getting some attention, it was important for the family to guide you and make sure you didn't get in over your head. Aaron, they're not coming to celebrate you. They're coming to control you." I squeezed my eyes shut, a bitter taste in my mouth. "Thanks, Uncle Rob," I said quietly. "I appreciate you telling me." I hung up the phone and looked back at the email. My mother's words, "We are so proud," mocked me from the screen. It was all a lie, a beautifully crafted, manipulative lie. Fine. They wanted to visit my workshop? They wanted to see what I've built? Okay, I'll show them. I typed back a short reply. Saturday at 2 p.m. works. See you then. The trap was set, but this time, I wasn't the one who was going to walk into it. Saturday arrived, a gray, overcast day that perfectly matched my mood. The new workshop was my sanctuary. It was 3 times the size of Samuel's old place, filled with gleaming new equipment paid for by the Oakhaven Advance. The scent of pine, cherry, and fresh-cut oak filled the air. This was the kingdom I had built, not with an inheritance or a family connection, but with my own 2 hands. At precisely 2 p.m., a sleek, black sedan pulled up outside. My father, mother, and Evan got out. They looked out of place, their expensive clothes a stark contrast to the rustic industrial neighborhood. They walked in, and for a moment, they just stood there, taking it all in. I could see the genuine surprise on their faces. This was far more than the little hobby shop they had imagined. "Aaron," my mother said, breaking the silence, her voice oozing with false warmth as she rushed forward to hug me. I stood stiffly, not returning the gesture. "Oh, this is just incredible. We had no idea." "It's bigger than I expected," my father admitted, his eyes scanning the equipment, calculating the cost. It was the closest he could come to a compliment. Evan, however, had already recovered his swagger. He strolled through the workshop, running a dismissive hand over a stack of perfectly sanded maple boards. "Not bad, little brother," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Made a real business out of playing with blocks. Who knew?" He picked up a small, carved fox from a workbench. "So, what's the plan? Sell a few of these trinkets and then get a real job?" I ignored him, my focus on my father. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice even. Richard looked taken aback by my directness. He was used to being in charge, to setting the tone. "What do you mean?" "We came to see you, to celebrate your success. Your mother said it's time to put the past to rest." "Is it?" I asked, turning to my mother. "Is that what you were telling Aunt Carol on the phone the other night? That my success was just luck, and that you needed to guide me?" Eleanor's smile froze on her face. A flicker of panic crossed her eyes before she composed herself. I don't know what you're talking about." Robert must have misunderstood. "He didn't misunderstand," I said, my voice dropping lower. He just finally decided to stop being a silent witness to your lies. The air in the room grew thick with tension. The polite facade was cracking. Evan scoffed. Oh, here we go again. Saint Aaron, the martyr. Can't you just accept that we're happy for you? Or is your ego so fragile that you have to invent conspiracies? My ego? I took a step closer to him, and for the first time he looked uneasy. My ego wasn't the one that smashed a 7-year-old's birthday present. My ego wasn't the one who laughed while he cried. For God's sake, are you still on about that? Evan threw his hands up in exasperation. It was 3 years ago. It was a stupid toy. It was a piece of my heart that you broke to make yourself feel big. I shot back, my voice rising. And it wasn't a toy to him. It was a promise. A promise that you and everyone else in this family broke. My father finally stepped in, his voice taking on the booming, authoritative tone he used to shut down arguments. That's enough. All of you. Aaron, we are here to extend an olive branch. Your business is growing. You're going to need guidance. Real business experience. Evan and I, we can help you. We can make Leo's Landing a part of the family firm. We can protect you. There it was. The real reason they were here. It wasn't about pride. It was about possession. They saw something valuable and they wanted to absorb it, to own it, to put their name on it. Protect me. I let out a short, bitter laugh. The only thing I ever needed protection from was you. Just as Richard was about to retort, the door to the workshop chimed. All heads turned. Standing in the doorway, looking elegant and powerful in a crimson coat, was Margaret Albright. She smiled warmly when she saw me. Aaron, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a razor. I hope I'm not interrupting. I was just in the neighborhood and wanted to drop off the final contract drafts. My family stared, speechless. They had no idea who she was, but her air of authority was unmistakable. I smiled, a real, genuine smile. Margaret, you're not interrupting at all. In fact, your timing is perfect. Come in. There are some people I'd like you to meet. Margaret Albright walked into the workshop, her presence immediately commanding the space. She exuded a quiet confidence that made my father's loud authority seem crude by comparison. Margaret, I'd like you to meet my family, I said, my voice calm and steady. This is my mother, Eleanor, my father, Richard, and my brother, Evan. Margaret extended a polite hand to my father. Richard, pleasure. Margaret Albright, from the Oak Haven Toy Collective. The blood drained from my father's face. I saw his eyes widen in recognition, and his hand, which had started to reach for hers, faltered for a split second. Evan's smug expression vanished, replaced by one of stunned confusion. My mother just looked back and forth between them, trying to understand the sudden shift in the room's dynamics. Oak Haven, Richard finally managed to say, his voice a little hoarse as he shook her hand. Of course, I know your company well. My firm submitted a proposal to you a few months back, for a licensing partnership. Ah, yes, Margaret said, retracting her hand. Her tone was professionally pleasant, but her eyes were sharp. I remember the proposal. Very thorough. There was a subtle emphasis on the word that made it clear it was not a compliment. She then turned her full attention back to me, dismissing them as if they were no longer in the room. She handed me a thick portfolio. Here are the finalized contracts, Aaron. The board was unanimous. They are thrilled. The funding for the workshop expansion will be wired Monday morning, and the press release announcing our exclusive partnership with Leo's Landing goes out on Tuesday. Every word was a hammer blow, dismantling my father's world right in front of him. Exclusive partnership. Workshop expansion. Press release. Evan stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. Exclusive partnership? What is she talking about? She's talking about the future of this company, I said, looking directly at my father. A future that I built. On my own. Margaret, ever the consummate professional, seemed to sense the underlying drama and decided to deliver the final, devastating stroke. She looked at my father with a polite, almost pitying smile. You know, Richard, it's a competitive market. We considered dozens of partners for our new artisanal line. Your firm's proposal was on the final shortlist. My father straightened up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He thought this was his way back in. But ultimately, Margaret continued, her voice turning crisp and decisive, it lacked a certain something, a vision, an authenticity. We were looking for a true craftsman, not just a marketing angle. Then we found Erin. She placed a hand lightly on my shoulder, a gesture of alliance that was unmistakable. We found the soul we were looking for. The choice, in the end, was not difficult at all. Leo's Landing was simply in another league. Silence. A deep, profound, and utterly satisfying silence. The look on my father's face was something I will never forget. It wasn't anger. It was a complete and total collapse of his entire worldview. He, Richard, the titan of industry, had been beaten. Not by a rival corporation, but by his own son. The artistic, sensitive, disappointing son he had written off years ago. And he had been beaten in a fair fight he didn't even know he was in. Evan looked like he had been slapped. His entire identity was built on being the successful one, the heir apparent. In that moment he was nothing. Just the brother of the man Oakhaven had chosen. My mother looked utterly lost. Her carefully constructed reality, the one where her husband was all-powerful and her eldest son was the star, had just been vaporized. I felt calm. There was no surge of triumph, no desire to gloat. Just a quiet, profound sense of peace. The war was over, and I hadn't just won. I had rendered the entire conflict irrelevant. I wasn't fighting for their approval anymore. I had achieved something far more valuable, my own. After signing a few preliminary documents, Margaret made a graceful exit. She gave my family a polite nod, shook my hand warmly, and said, "I'll call you Monday, Erin. Welcome to the Oakhaven family." The door chimed softly as it closed behind her, leaving me alone with the ghosts of my past. The silence they left behind was heavy, thick with unspoken words and shattered egos. For a long minute, no one moved. My father stared at the spot where Margaret had stood, his face pale, his shoulders slumped. I had never seen him look so defeated, so small. The all-powerful patriarch was gone, replaced by an old man who had just been publicly rendered obsolete. My mother was the first to speak, her voice trembling slightly as she tried to glue the pieces of their world back together. "Well, Erin, that's wonderful news. We had no idea you were aiming so high." It was a desperate attempt to reframe the narrative, to pretend they had been on my side all along. I didn't answer. I just looked at her, my expression unyielding, and her words trailed off into a pathetic silence. Evan, for his part, was completely deflated. The smirk, the arrogance, the condescending attitude, it was all gone. He just leaned against a workbench, looking at the floor, running a hand through his hair. He looked lost. The golden child had lost his shine. Finally, my father moved. He walked over to a display of my smaller toys, the carved foxes, the jointed bears. He picked one up, turning it over and over in his hands, as if seeing my work for the first time. "All these years," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "All these years, I thought this was just a waste of time, a distraction from a real career." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a confusing mix of emotions I couldn't decipher. I didn't understand. "No," I said, my voice devoid of anger, filled only with a quiet finality. "You didn't want to." There was nothing left to say. The power dynamic had been permanently and irrevocably altered. They hadn't come here to celebrate me. They'd come to claim a piece of my success. And in doing so, they had revealed their true selves so completely that there was no going back. They saw me as a commodity, a new asset for the family portfolio. But I wasn't for sale. Not anymore. This was the moment everything changed, when I finally took back control of my own life story. Thank you for staying with me to this point. You have no idea how much it means. If you've been on this journey with me, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you're here with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences, my struggles, might mean something to someone else out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. They began to shuffle towards the door, a silent, defeated procession. It felt like watching a foreign film, like these were strangers I vaguely recognized. My mother paused at the doorway, turning back to me with pleading eyes. "Aaron, please," she said, her voice soft. "Don't let it end like this. We can fix this. We're still family." The word family hung in the air. For so long, that word had felt like a chain, a weight that I was obligated to carry. It meant forgiveness without apology, peace without justice. It meant my feelings and my son's feelings were secondary to the comfort of the group. I looked past her to my father, who was still avoiding my gaze, and to Evan, who was just staring blankly into space. "Family?" I repeated, the word tasting strange in my mouth. "Let me tell you what family is going to look like from now on." I took a step forward, and they all stopped, turning to listen. My voice was quiet, but it filled the entire workshop. There was no more anger, no more pleading, just the hard, clear lines of my new reality. "First," I said, looking at Evan, "you are going to call me. Not text, not email. You are going to call me and you are going to apologize. Not to me. You are going to apologize to my son. You are going to tell him that what you did was cruel, that it was not a joke, and that it was your fault, not his. You will do this because he deserves to hear it, not because you want something from me." Evan flinched, but he nodded slowly. "Second," I turned to my mother, "you will stop lying. You will stop pretending everything is fine. You will stop trying to keep the peace by sacrificing my son's well-being. If you ever undermine me or belittle what I do behind my back again, you will never see me or your grandson again. Am I clear?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. And finally, I looked at my father. He finally met my gaze. His eyes were dark, unreadable. I don't want your business advice. I don't want your guidance. I don't need your protection. What I needed was a father. A man who would defend his son and grandson instead of his own pride. I don't know if that man even exists, but if you ever want a relationship with Leo, you will have to prove it. Not with words, not with money, with effort. You will show up. You will be present. You will learn who your grandson is, not who you think he should be. I let the words settle. I had built walls around my heart for years to protect myself. Now I was finally building a door. But I was the only one with the key. "This isn't a negotiation," I said, my voice softening just a fraction. "This is the price of admission. You can choose to pay it or you can choose to walk away. Either way, Leo and I will be fine. We already are." I held their gazes for a long moment, then turned and walked back towards my workbench, my back to them. It was a dismissal. The conversation was over. I picked up a piece of wood and a sanding block, the familiar weight a comfort in my hands. A few moments later, I heard the soft chime of the door as it opened, and then closed, leaving me in the quiet, peaceful solitude of the world I had built. 6 months later, life found a new rhythm, a rhythm set by the hum of saws and the laughter of my son. The Oak Haven partnership transformed everything. Leo's Landing was no longer a one-man operation run on caffeine and fumes. The new workshop was a bustling hub of creativity. I had a small, dedicated team of craftspeople, including Samuel, who I had convinced to come out of retirement to be my workshop foreman. "I'm too old for this," he'd grumble every day, a huge smile on his face. The money was life-changing, of course. We moved out of the apartment above the laundromat and into a modest house with a big backyard. I paid off the few debts I had and fully funded Leo's college fund, a weight lifting off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. But the real change wasn't the money. It was the peace, the absence of drama, the feeling of waking up every morning knowing that my world was stable, safe, and mine. Leo thrived. He was doing well in school, had a great group of friends, and was becoming a talented little artist in his own right. He spent hours in the workshop with me, not just watching, but creating his own little projects at a workbench I had built just for him. The shadow of that disastrous birthday party had finally begun to fade. My family, for the most part, had kept their distance. It was a fragile, unspoken truce. My mother sent polite, superficial texts. My father remained silent. And then one day a package arrived. It was addressed to Leo. There was no return address. I opened it cautiously. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a beginner's wood carving set, with whittling knives, safety gloves, and a block of soft basswood. And underneath it all was a letter. The handwriting was messy, almost childish. It was from Evan. I sat down with Leo and read it to him. Dear Leo, I don't expect you to understand this, and I don't deserve for you to. What I did at your 7th birthday party was the meanest thing I have ever done. It wasn't a joke. It was cruel. I was jealous of your dad, of his talent, and of how much he loved you. I broke your castle because I was a broken person. It was my fault, not yours. You did nothing wrong. I am so sorry. I know sorry is just a word. My therapist says I need to make amends, not just apologize. I don't know how, but I saw this carving set and I thought of you and your dad. Maybe one day you can show me what you make. Sincerely, Uncle Evan. Leo was quiet for a long time after I finished reading. He looked at the carving set, then at the letter, then at me. He's sad. Isn't he, Daddy? Leo asked, his voice full of a simple, profound empathy that only a child can possess. Yeah, buddy, I said, my throat tight. I think he is. Can we keep the tools? He asked. Of course, I said. Do you want to write back to him? Leo thought for a moment. Not yet, he said. But maybe one day. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. It was a single, shaky step on a long road. The next weekend, I took Leo to the park. While he was playing with his friends, I saw a familiar figure standing by a tree on the edge of the field. It was my father. He was just watching, his hands in his pockets, keeping his distance. He didn't approach. He didn't call out. He just watched his grandson play, a lonely, solitary figure. When Leo's game was over and we started to walk home, he was gone. He had shown up. It was the smallest possible effort, but it was more than he had given me in years. The ground, frozen for so long, was beginning to thaw. My father's silent appearances became a strange new routine. Every few weeks I'd see him, at the edge of Leo's soccer games, in the back of the auditorium during a school play. He never approached me. He never spoke. He was just there, a ghost haunting the edges of our happy life. I didn't know what to make of it. It was unsettling, but it was also, as I demanded, an effort. A clumsy, silent, awkward effort. One evening, Uncle Robert came over for dinner. He had become a regular, welcome presence in our lives. He was wonderful with Leo, teaching him chess and telling him old, silly family stories that didn't involve pain. After Leo had gone to bed, Rob and I were sitting on the back porch watching the fireflies. I saw Richard at Leo's game last week, Rob said quietly, swirling the ice in his glass. I know, I said. He's been doing that for a few months now. Rob sighed, a heavy, weary sound. He doesn't know how to talk to you, Aaron. He never has. He doesn't have the tools. He had them for Evan, I said, the old bitterness creeping into my voice. No, he didn't, Rob said, turning to look at me, his expression serious. He just had a script for Evan, the successful son, the heir. That was a role he understood because it was the role that was forced on him. He doesn't have a script for you. You're the artist, the one who got away. He took a long sip of his drink. Do you know what your father wanted to be when he was young? I shook my head. A businessman, I assume, like his father. Rob let out a short, sad laugh. No, not even close. Your father, he was an incredible painter. I mean, truly gifted. He won scholarships. He was accepted into one of the best art schools in the country. He wanted to spend his life painting landscapes. I stared at him, trying to process this image of my pragmatic, ruthless father as a young, aspiring artist. It felt like trying to imagine a rock wanting to fly. So what happened? I asked. Grandfather happened, Rob said, his voice hardening. Our father. He was a hard man, harder than Richard ever was. He saw art as a weakness, a frivolous waste of time. He told Richard that if he went to art school, he would be disowned. No support, no family, no inheritance. He would be cut off completely. Grandfather told him his duty was to the family business, to make money, to be a man. The story settled over me, heavy and suffocating. So Richard gave it up, Rob continued. He packed away his canvases and his paints, went to business school, and became the man his father wanted him to be. He buried that part of himself so deep, I don't think he even remembers it's there. But it is. And then you came along. His son. The artist. Everything he wasn't allowed to be. And instead of nurturing it, he tried to crush it. Because seeing you succeed at what he was forced to fail at, I think it was just too painful for him to bear. It wasn't an excuse. It didn't wash away years of cruelty and neglect. It didn't forgive him for what he let happen to Leo. But it was an explanation. A heartbreaking, tragic explanation. The cruelty he had shown me wasn't just about me. It was about him. It was the ghost of his own murdered dream. He wasn't just my father. He was a victim of his own father, a man who had passed down his trauma like a cursed family heirloom. And I finally understood. The cycle hadn't started with me, but I was the one who was going to end it. Leo's 11th birthday felt like the closing of a circle. We held the party in the workshop. The place was filled with his friends. The air thick with the smell of sawdust, pizza, and birthday cake. Samuel was there, showing the kids how to safely use a small hand drill. Uncle Robert was leading a very serious game of chess in the corner. It was loud, chaotic, and perfect. I had extended an invitation to my parents and Evan. I didn't do it for them. I did it for me and for Leo. It was a test. A way to see if any of the fragile seeds of change had taken root. Evan came alone. He looked different. Thinner, quieter. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a hesitant uncertainty. He gave Leo a small, awkwardly wrapped gift and then just stood by the wall watching. He didn't try to force conversation. He just observed. Later, I saw Leo go up to him and show him a small, lopsided bird he had carved from the basswood block Evan had sent him. Evan knelt down, and for the first time, I saw him really look at my son. He listened, and he smiled a small, sad, genuine smile. My parents arrived last. My mother brought a ridiculously large cake, a classic Eleanor move, but she seemed to understand it was a secondary offering. She was quiet, respectful, and focused her attention on the other parents. My father stood by the door for a long time, just as he had at the soccer games, an outsider looking in. Finally, he walked over to me. He was holding a long, flat, rectangular gift. For Leo, he said, his voice gruff. I took it from him. You can give it to him yourself, I said gently. He shook his head. No, this is for both of you. Later, after the guests had gone and the workshop was quiet again, Leo and I opened the gift. Inside was a professional-grade art easel, and next to it, a beautiful wooden box filled with a complete set of oil paints, pristine brushes, and a stack of blank canvases. There was no card. There didn't need to be. I looked at the gift, then at the memory of my father standing in the doorway of this place I had built, a place of creation and passion. He hadn't just given his grandson a gift. He was trying to give him back the dream that had been stolen from him half a century ago. He was trying to give Leo the opportunity he never had. The cycle was broken. The healing wasn't complete. The family wasn't magically fixed. There were still scars, still memories that would ache on cold days. But it was no longer a story of pain. It had become a story of possibility. I stood there with my son, in the heart of our sanctuary, and I realized that building something new is always harder than breaking something old. It takes more time, more patience, more love. We had taken the broken pieces of our past, and we hadn't just fixed them. We had used them to build a better, stronger, and more beautiful future. And that was a masterpiece in itself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it reached you in some way wherever you are. It's been a long journey, and sharing it helps make sense of it all. Have you ever had to break a cycle in your own family or your life? It can be a lonely road, and I'd be honored to hear about your own experiences. Please feel free to share your story in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear more, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Take care of yourselves.